Thank you for watching the VIFF short forum at the 40th edition of the Vancouver International Film Festival. My name is Curtis Woloschuk. I'm the Associate Director of Programming at VIFF, and we are very excited to be joined by three of the filmmakers responsible for the work you've just seen. We have Ellie Grant from the Isobel Imprint, Ossie Michelin from Evans Drum, and Charles Wahl from the Mohel, sorry. Thank you all three for joining us to talk a little bit more about your films. Ellie, I'm going to begin with you. I understand you've come to filmmaking in relatively recent years, and a relatively recent graduate of documentary filmmaking program, and then made this your third short film, I think, in rather trying circumstances amid the pandemic. But I guess curious to know, was telling this story always one of the reasons you wanted to explore filmmaking, or was it a matter of once you started following the path into filmmaking, you knew at some point you'd want to tell this story about your sister and your relationship with her?
Well, it's an interesting question, Curtis, because it wasn't on my mind at all when I went back to film school at 53. So yes, pretty late in life and pretty recently. But it was actually when I was sitting with a friend who's a filmmaker out from your way, Charles, Andrea Dorfman from Halifax. And she said, now that you're a documentary filmmaker, have you ever thought about making a documentary about your sister's suicide? And I was pretty sure that I wouldn't. It was pretty clear for many reasons. It had been 12 years. I had done a lot of processing. I know that we do a lot of processing in our films and so on. But I said no, and we started talking about how I ended up in Canada and how I ended up, coming to see my sister, etc., as a child or as a 13-year-old. And we were laughing, and she said, that's the story you should tell. And I had never thought about it because I had never considered that I would ever do a memoir film. And so the seed was planted, and it was just kind of planted there. I had just finished school, so it just sat there for a while. And then when the pandemic came and we were all at home, I thought some more about it, and I thought about collaborating with my nephew who lived in Ontario, and we could do it at distance and so on. And I had time at home to think about it and to start thinking about how would I tell this kind of story.
And I imagine the story likely had to change shape again once you realized you're going to make it under the restrictions of COVID-19 and perhaps not being able to follow the path that you originally envisioned.
Yeah, because I had envisioned going to Ontario, the story is about my time in Toronto in the summer of 1978 with my nephew, who was 6 years of age at the time when I was 13. And so the idea was I'd go back there, we would get together, we would go to all our old haunts, and we would film stuff and also go through his mum's photo albums and videos and home movies and et cetera, her diaries. And when we realized that wasn't going to happen, then he shipped stuff out to me, and I had to rethink telling the story mostly just from my point of view. I'm sure there's a lot of people talk about, some of the gifts that came with those changes. And that certainly was one for me, because I got to spend all this time with the memories of my sister and trying to work out how would I take a story like this that was very specific and work out what parts do you tell that are interesting and meaningful to other people beyond your own interests. So it was actually a really, really great process.
Ossie, I know you work in many different mediums, including podcasting and broadcast journalism. Curious to know why documentary film seemed like the right kind of medium to tell the story of Inuit drum dancing and through the story of Evan and Amy.
Well, the nice thing about documentary filmmaking is I get to slow it down. I get to spend some time with them. I followed Evan's progression with drum dancing and Amy for about 2 years, a little bit more than that. In part, it was because of the pandemic and delays, but it really gave us a chance to really slow down, really communicate with Amy and Evan about what they want to see in the film, what they want to do, what they want to learn. And I think that that's a luxury that we don't normally get in journalism or in something like podcasting or anything where there's a lot of very quick deadlines and fast turnaround. And I really had the chance to like put thought behind it and make sure that I did everything in a good way and make sure that both Amy and Evan wound up with a really positive experience and a really good, souvenir to take home with them. I was saying to Amy, most people get like home videos of their kids when they're about this age, but you get a documentary film made with the NFB, and they just loved it. And we just had the community screening back in Labrador this past Friday, like a week ago, and they were there and they drummed for everybody, and Evan was shy. This is the biggest audience he's drummed in front of, but he got up and performed for everybody. And I just, I told him I was so proud of him. He was scared, but he was able to do it. And I really think that this film is going to be really, because we were able to take the time and the care that it deserved, I think that it made it even more touching and more special for not just the family, but for everyone that sees it, and especially for Labrador Inuit. This is a story that I'm glad that I can help share our story about.
Well, I think maybe it was in your director's statement, you referred to the film as being a celebration as well. And I think many people equate like a celebration to being this very finite event. But I think when you talk about family and pride around culture and community, this maybe it's the making of it, but it kind of reminds you that celebration can be a very protracted and kind of lived experience as well, which I think is one of the lovely things about the film.
Yeah, and it's just this sort of joy that they have when they play the drum, and you can see it on the faces and the connections that they make with each other. And it's something that like I really wanted to make it clear in the film that they're part of this wave of young Inuit parents passing it on to this first generation. And it's just so great to see this happening, that they're part of this, and that I think that it really just shows that this is part of our culture that was not celebrated for a while. Now it is really brought out to the forefront, and it's really brought out for almost every celebration that we have. And it's just a good way that we can celebrate who we are every day. And you get to see it in the film. It's very much everyday life of just Labrador Inuits and their love for drum dancing. And I'm glad that we got to share this with everyone.
Charles, your film also hinges on tradition and family, and whether it's a celebration of such things is maybe more open to question or up for debate. I was really taken with the idea that this is a film that investigates like the transactional elements of religion and organized religion. I was raised Roman Catholic, and like my family every once in a while would like be responsible for tallying the collections afterwards, and you're in the back of the church with like these piles of money and you feel like you're in a Scorsese film or something. Like it was just a really bizarre balance to equate the two and try to find the balance between those two. So I was curious to hear from you like that your inroads with the transactional elements of religion, and what really fascinates you about that, or where you find that understandable conflict that kind of drives this story.
Yeah, well, I mean, the transactional nature of religion is something that's it's been a topic that's been on my mind for a long time. Growing up, Jewish I didn't grow up like full Orthodox Jewish, but like, I mean, when I say full Orthodox, I mean like black hat, like that level Jewish, but I grew up with like, an Orthodox mother. And so, we went to synagogue, I had the bar mitzvah, everything, we did Shabbat and all that stuff. And, having a lot of cousins around, uncles, aunts, it was a big part of my life growing up. But the thing is, I grew up in like, not really a big Jewish community at all though. So like, I was like, for example, where I went to school, my family came to Canada when we were very young. And I went to school, a French school in Toronto that was mostly immigrants and from all around the world. And so I wasn't around many Jewish people. So I wasn't like at home, it would be very Jewish, but then when I would go to school, it wouldn't be like Jewish at all. So I kind of always had like looked at it a little more objectively because of that. And then as I grew up and started to, become more aware of like forming my own perspectives on things like that, both me, my cousins, and a lot of us would start to see kind of somehow like the money involved in some of the some of the ceremonies and aspects of things actually played a pretty big part. And then, so that was always something that was kind of always in the back of my head. And then when I became kind of a parent myself, and, went through I've been through the experiences depicted in the movie twice. I have two boys, so I've been through it 2 times, right? So going through it and seeing the process of what it takes to go through it, I was like, you know, there's a movie here. There's definitely something worth exploring. Like, I don't necessarily have answers to this stuff because these are very large questions. You know what I mean? Like, because really, ultimately, the movie is about living with religion in the modern world. You know, and it applies to all religions and even people who aren't religious, because all of us are raised by people who instill values in us and expectations on us. And then we, as we age and become our own people, have to come face to face with them at some point and be like, you know, we're going to do things a little different, or we might not do it the same way. And that conflict's always going to be there. You know what I mean? Unless you grow up the exact same way as the people who raised you, right? And in the exact same communities as well. So it really kind of, the whole genesis of the film really came from that, from you know, the conflict of the two worlds and seeing what that's like, you know, in my own life. And also, I mean, I've heard so many crazy stories throughout the years of situations like the one depicted in the film, whether it's through a Brit Milah ceremony, through weddings, through conversion, funerals, even bar mitzvahs, like all kinds of different things. And I felt for a short film, centering it around that particular ceremony, the Brit Milah, would be a great way to explore these large things in such a small, short way.
One of the great things about the film is that, you know, when you have a story that fixates on a ceremony, and perhaps a ceremony that not everyone is completely comfortable with, you have the characters within your film playing characters themselves. So kind of putting forward the version of themselves that they feel is appropriate for the occasion. And it must have given you a lot of kind of nice moments to approach with your cast, as well as they're within a scene trying to assume who they are supposed to be in this circumstance.
Oh yeah, the actors were all like really excited to take part in the film and dive into it, right? Just because there is so much going on for everybody at all times, right? Like everyone, because the moment you have this rabbi show up at the house, like everyone's got to be on their best behavior. Everyone's intimidated by this person, even though he comes off as very disarming and very nice. You still always have to be on guard, you know, making sure you say the right thing at all times. And so there's always tons of subtext going on for each actor throughout the whole sequence. So yeah, they had a blast doing it the whole way through.
Ali, if I understand correctly, this film, you, again, because of circumstances we find ourselves in, had to employ some different techniques, you know, rather than maybe some talking heads, things like this, employing the image, the photos from your own archive, and really maybe changing your approach as a filmmaker, your practice as a filmmaker very early in your creative career as well. And what were perhaps some like the greatest challenges you found in having to make that hard right-hand turn into kind of just approaching the formal elements of filmmaking in a very different way?
I think, I mean, first of all, it was initially about materials. It was because I didn't actually know what was in that box. So I didn't know what I would have. I didn't know what would be on those home movies. I didn't know if there would be, when I first was watching them, thinking about, please let there be something from the summer of 1978, which is the whole part, you know, center of the movie. And then, of course, being able to look at other images and think, okay, of course, I can, you know, it's not all about that. I can use other images. And I think really it was just working out. I mean, what it taught me, I think, was the importance of story, because really I didn't have the richest of, like, you know, some materials. There were some, like, there's some such basic photographs, the way I've used them and so on, but that didn't seem to matter, in that the story well out, and it's a compelling enough story, and it seemed to connect enough with so many people. And it really, I think also as a filmmaker, it was great to get vulnerable this early in my filmmaking career, especially if I'm making documentaries. I recognize that that's what I'm asking other people to do. And so it was really great to be in some way kind of forced into a different approach to filmmaking that I hadn't planned, because then that allowed me to have that experience. And I hope that it's going to make me a better filmmaker and a better storyteller.
Yeah, I really like that sentiment of putting yourself in that position you would ask of others. That's a lovely, lovely sentiment. Ossie, for yourself, maybe on that, element of story, as you found the production of the film stretching out to 2 years, was it always maybe clear to you the spine of the story you were telling, or was it a matter of it really taking shape on its own and then you just paring that down into the format that we see in the finished film?
I always knew that we wanted to take Amy and Evan to meet a drum maker and learn how to make a drum for themselves so that they could take this knowledge and learn, and we could show how the drums are made. But it took a few twists and turns en route. The first person we found was all ready to go, but then at the last moment, he said, "I have cold feet. I can't do this. I don't want to go on film." I was like, okay. So we found another person. Same story again a few months later. We found everything was ready. We were ready to film, and then there was a medical issue, and we had to postpone to March 2020 for the first shoot. And I arrived before all my team. I was in the Halifax airport actually watching the news of the pandemic across the country, and things were delayed again until the summer, and then again until September. So in a way, at the time, I just thought, we're just going to get this done. You know what? You throw at me what you will. We're going to get this done. And actually, before the film started, Amy, as you might notice in the first few scenes, is very pregnant. She went into false labor 2 days before the film and gave birth 5 days later. And I talked with her, and they said, we can take a break, we can wait. And she's like, nope, we're going to do this now. So I said, okay, if you're down, I'm down. So we really had this really unpredictable journey, but just we knew that the basic elements of just seeing them at home, seeing them being a family, seeing them drumming, and then learning how to make a drum, and just how we got from all of these elements together and the path that they took was not how we had planned. But in the end, staying with them for such a long time and seeing, like, 2 years in the life of a small kid is quite a bit. And at the beginning of the film, Evan, I think he's not even 6 years old yet. He's 5 going on 6. And then by the time it's done, he's 7 going on 8. So we really see his progression and his growth, both as a little human being, but also as a drummer. And just I think it gave it a really nice progression. And then we also got to see the birth of his little brother, Dallas. So we see, him in his mommy's tummy at first, and then we see him out there and his interest in the drum already. So it kind of it gave us this extra element of the different generations growing up and how they're all taking to it. So I think at the time, I wasn't exactly thrilled with all of the delays, but I think in the end, it was the story that happened I'm so happy with, and it gave us something that I wasn't expecting. And I think that just added another layer to everything. So I'm thankful though that it turned out the way it turned out, and even if the journey was a bit unexpected.
There have been a few Indigenous films have been made. I think of Edge of the Knife out in this part of the world, which was really in part, an act of language preservation as well. And I wonder for yourself, do you see Evan's drum? It doesn't feel like a piece of preservation of tradition, so much as almost like this catalyst for other people to discover it, kind of a jumping off point. And I could see this being screened to young viewers and them getting really excited about embracing this practice as well.
Well, if you go to the north coast of Labrador, to Nunatsiavut, you'll see that there's all these children drum groups and things that are already there in the schools. It's already present. But I think as well, it just sort of it helps make the excitement even more for these kids that are growing up with the drum now, that they actually get to see themselves reflected back in a film like this. So I think it's just more fuel for this cultural revival that's happening. And I'm just so excited to know that this is going to be played in schools across Labrador, and we're going to get to see kids that are drumming say, hey, look, that's like me. That's one of the most exciting and best parts of this whole experience for me.
And finally, as we wrap up, Charles, I'm curious, because you said you went through experiences similar to what we've seen on screen twice with your own sons, and now you've made a film about it. Has it brought you any, if not closure, greater clarity around the ceremonies and rituals and circumstances and travails depicted in the film, or what was the process now that's has been committed to film in terms of your relationship to it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely. Yeah, I definitely look at things a little differently with a little more clarity on my part. I definitely do feel, I do think tradition is important. I do think that having that's important. I do think it's important to pass it on. I think it's important to pass it on in a way, in a positive way, in a way that, the younger generation can still make their own choices, so you're not forcing something on them, but you are, showing them the traditions that matter. And in terms of like, I don't want to give it too much away, I guess, but I mean, maybe I can, in terms of like the twist that happens in the movie and stuff like that, and like what the rabbi does at the end. In my mind, I don't necessarily agree with what he did, and that I'm very firm about. I don't agree with what he did. I don't think he should have even come down and done it. But I do recognize that to him, he probably feels he did the right thing, and he probably thinks he actually did do a good deed. I don't think in his mind he thinks he did anything wrong, and that's what kind of makes religion complicated, because to one person they view it one way, and they firmly view it one way, and they think they're doing it the right way. And there's not much I can say to a person like that, right? I mean, that's, unfortunately, there's a lot of challenges in the world because of that, but that is the truth. That's something I've come to peace with, is the fact that a person in that position, whether you agree with them or not, that's what they believe.
Well, I thank all three of you so much for sharing your work today and sharing your thoughts on the work as well. We really loved having all the films in the festival.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.